you. It's great to be here, and thank you for the privilege of it. My name is David Larson. I'm from South Africa, and it's my second time at this conference, and it's a great privilege to be speaking to you on the digitisation of the ANC archive. I want to speak to you about digitisation, preservation, and presentation of the archive. This archive project started in 2011 and has been going on up until now. Just maybe some of you don't know much about the ANC archive. Maybe this will just give you a bit of an introduction.
In a beautiful remote corner of the Eastern Cape, hidden away within the walls of the renowned Fort Hare University, lies a treasure trove of historical records telling the story of the liberation of South Africa. Photographs, videos, audio recordings, artifacts gathered from many sources around the world. And at its core, the ANC archives.
So the South African government was consolidating a new level of resistance, armed conflict. They created that. They forced us into it. We surely cannot lose this war.
And generals that make history, but the masses of the people, the workers, the peasants, the doctors, the lawyers, the clergy, all our people, I have seen them making history.
And that's certainly true. Within the ANC archive, there's a lot of just normal history of people who were thrown into kind of situation where they had to stand up against a great evil in society, and they were just normal people. And you can actually see that in the archive. And the archive covers photographs and posters, and it's got a lot of documents, badges and museum objects, and also video and also audio files. And yeah, even this is a record cover. So this archive also covers a period right from the beginning, 1912, all the way up to sort of the end of apartheid, and even a little bit beyond that. And it's actually been gathered as well ongoingly, but at the University of Fort Hare is that sort of period in time, and this is a young Cyril Ramaphosa when he was at Samafco up in Tanzania. And it also covers material that comes from Europe and from the anti-apartheid movement in other parts of the world, which is also a wonderful resource in the archive. What really happened in terms of the digitisation is that the ANC was having a 100-year celebration around 2012, and then they approached an organisation which is a broadcaster called MultiChoice, because they thought they had the skills to actually digitise the archive, and asked them, please, could they be involved in digitising this archive. MultiChoice said yes, and the archive is housed at the University of Fort Hare. And then as they got into it, they realized they didn't really have the skills, and that's when they approached us. And so we then were brought on board, and originally they asked, can you digitize the entire lot? Can you do the audio visuals and everything and manage the whole lot? And at that stage we said, no, we're not prepared to do that. We want to stay within our bounds of what we're good at. And so we said we would take on the paper records and the negatives and transparencies and photographic records. Audio-visual then was to be put out to other organizations that we had been working with, Doxa for the video, and the International Library of African Music at Rhodes University for the audio. And in those days, that's 2011, 2012, we were using flatbed scanners, and it was an extremely slow process, but we kind of got through enough material to be able to have something for the centenary celebrations. We also did some training of local people in the area from other institutions around, just so that they are also engaging with archiving and digitization. And this was the team. This was the team for that first initial project. And it was a really successful project because we were all working to our strengths. And then we got to present to the president. That was President Zuma at the time, at around the time of the ANC 100-year celebration. This was at the University of Fort Hare. Then there was a big opening of the archive up in Johannesburg with the president as well. So at the end of that phase, really, we had accomplished very little. Only 20,000 photographs, 24,000 document pages, just over 1,000 video and audio files, and 300 museum objects. We realized the archive is very much bigger than that, and we motivated and wrote proposals and all that. And then by November 2015, we were brought back and to start another project. And the first part of that project was to itemize everything, because the archive had been ordered down to the folder level but not to the item level. So we spent 9 months just itemizing material even before we started bringing any scanning machines in, and ordering the archive, which carried on while we digitized in parallel. And we used several different workflows. One was just a plain paper workflow, and we used this ScanMax machine, which is a belt-driven form feed scanner, very gentle on pages. It's a German product. And then we used the Atisbrook drive, which we modified because we were unhappy with what it was giving us, and we managed to modify it and get us what we wanted out of it. And then we were capturing negatives and transparencies on high-end sort of DSLRs. And then for fragile manuscripts, we were using phase 1, an XF camera, and also for another sort of parallel workflow. Here we're digitizing posters. We were using a 100 megapixel phase back with an Alpha FPS 12 camera and Rodenstock lenses. That camera we've used in various ways. This is a 9 meter long painting by 1.5 meter high, and we digitized it in sections, and then none of you need to be convinced of the quality of these cameras. And that was the team that we had at that second phase of the project, and which was very much bigger. So we had digitized 83,000 photographs and 1.8 million document pages, and then 3,000 flat objects, and then the metadata as well, about 30,000 images that we've had captured metadata, 12,000 of which we had to kind of do forensic metadata investigation, because the information in the archive itself was so bad, and we had to kind of reconstruct it, and we had some really very clever PhD kind of people working on that for us. And then obviously 2,000 metadata of documents. And so that really was the digitization and the capture of the material. And then how do we store it? How do we look after it? Well, early days we had a server stack sitting at the University of Fort Hare. For various reasons, it proved difficult to manage it there, connectivity issues and so on. So we moved it to our own data center that we built, which had a server room with biometric access and all the fire retardant things in place. And then that's backed up to a separate building where our main offices are, and to LTO tape, and also to Blu-ray disc, because that gives us a write-once media option, which is impervious to ransomware and other such threats. And so, we were constructing a very sort of a system, a digital repository that has checks and balances, and even those Blu-ray discs are kept 20 kilometers away in a safe, in a fireproof safe, and so on. And then we also have a web server that sits in the data center in Johannesburg. And so really trying to make that available to the world in a fairly reliable way. I think we could have done things better at times, but I think we've kind of consistently got there, and with backup power and backup internet service and all sorts of things. So bit by bit we've built it. And then to actually present the archives, originally there was a public site constructed by another company, and then we had a research site that you could make application on the public site for access to the research archive. And that was sitting on our old MEMAT 3 system, which we developed, and which got rather long in the tooth and dated. So we started to look around, how can we create better solutions for this? And there were two projects that inspired us in that. And one was actually a project that we did with the Brenthurst Library and the Rijksmuseum. So we were digitizing material for of the Gordon papers for the Brenthurst, who were pushing that through to a Goede Hoop exhibition here at the Rijksmuseum. And just in terms of how the Rijksmuseum then presented that online was really lovely. And you can actually go and see this Robert Gordon website. And you could actually interact with the materials online, the high res. And we thought that was fantastic. And then there was another project we did with the Google Cultural History project. And we were shooting isiXweshwe materials from the Ezekiel museums in Cape Town. And again, they presented that really beautifully online. Now, we kind of knew about, Sea Dragon and other sort of technologies for presentation, and we were working with, we were getting a supply of digitization software from LIM, and they were using IIIF, and that's where we heard about IIIF. And then we were here in 2017 and got to hear more in depth from Stuart Snyder's about IIIF, and we were sold on it. And so then we've started to build that into our systems. And so we've got now a research website that is built on two different platforms. We decided to use an open source CMS, and we looked at Drupal and Joomla and WordPress, and we decided to use WordPress simply because everybody knows how to use WordPress. So teaching users how to use it was really straightforward. I know there are issues around its security, but actually at its core, it's just as secure as Drupal. So if you just manage the windows into it, and so then we started to use IIIF on the system as well, and that should have been a video to play. Okay, so here's the front end. We can search for materials, view them online, and then if you're logged in, then you can come through to the universal viewer and start to kind of actually engage with materials more in depth. And this doesn't just work for photographs, but also for manuscripts. And so we've been kind of applying it to manuscripts. So kind of the holy grail for us was that we wouldn't just be able to search across many manuscripts, but within manuscripts as well. And at the IIIF conference last year, I met a great crowd in London called Digitisation, who were able to do that for us. And so they've developed a system for us that allows us to search within manuscripts that uses Google Vision for its OCR. And then we were also using IIIF in our metadata application. So here I'm logged in as the administrator, and I've just assigned a whole lot of material to a particular metadata capturer. Now I've logged in as a metadata capturer, and now I can start to add material in the Dublin core fields or whichever metadata schema you want to use, and I can also view, kind of scroll in and view closer to the object. So we've developed this sort of web interface that really allows open access for researchers, but also licensing for publishers and broadcasters. And much of the material in the ANC archive is not, you don't know the provenance. It was a liberation archive gathered from many, many different places. And so we've had to do really careful due diligence, copyright research whenever someone wants to use it for broadcast or for publishers, and we assist the ANC in that. So just in conclusion, this project has been a really significant project for South Africa. It's been a catalyst for digitization. Google actually commissioned a report from the Economist Intelligence Unit called The New Age of Culture, and looking at digitization initiatives around the world and what countries are doing well and which are not. They only evaluated 2 countries in Africa, Kenya and South Africa was coming second. So the biggest economy in Africa not doing so well. And so, what this project has really been very exciting, what's been exciting about it is it's a local initiative. It was initiated by the ANC. They approached MultiChoice. It's been funded by MultiChoice, which is a South African company. The custodian of the physical archive is the University of Fort Hare, and then they were using local expertise in Africa Media Online. So that is very significant, because projects in right across Africa up to now have been foreign funded primarily, and many of them have ended up actually not being sustainable long term. There was a project by the Mellon Foundation, digitizing liberation history. That project, all that material sits on a server at the UKZN and is not accessible anymore. And so those are the kind of projects that can happen. So that brings us to, it's also been a catalyst for preservation. We were involved in writing the best practices for the National Digitisation Policy, and in that policy we recommended that there would be data centres in different parts of the country. That hasn't come to pass, and so we've really just got on with building a data centre that can kind of do this thing for long-term preservation, and we're wanting to go for this standard ISO 16363. We haven't got there yet. There's a long way to go, but that's what we want to do. We want to build a data center that right across our country and other parts of Africa, people can reliably place their content with us. But there have been some victories. This is the ANC Archives Committee just after presenting to the President and the NEC of the ANC, and we were going for an agreement that the government would take responsibility for looking after the archives, not just of the ANC, but all the political parties in South Africa. And the agreement was just reached, and you can see the smiles on people's faces. And we've been setting up a trust. In our context, government isn't necessarily always, and many other nations around the world, if you're in Europe or North America, you think government is going to be the safest repository of your heritage. That's not necessarily true in every nation around the world. And so really we wanted to set up a trust that can have government, can have business, can have civil society, can have others all involved in terms of the preservation of our heritage. And so we've kind of set up a Digitize Africa Trust, and we're hoping that that is going to be accepted. And then finally, a catalyst for technological innovation. We're wanting to make our MENAT system, which I've been showing you, open source, and we're busy raising funds for that, and wanting to make it interface with other open source systems like Archivematica and Atom and Fedora and Oral History, Metadata Synchronizer and PageThrow, and Stories and many others. So, so finally, there's more to be done. There's 797 more boxes in the vaults at University of Fort Hare. We've got lots and lots of metadata still to be done. And we've set up a community, hopefully getting volunteers over time, Metadata for Africa, which allows them to work online. And finally, digital repatriation. This is Kier Schuringer from the International Institute of Social History here in Amsterdam, and he's been very helpful. He's a real anti-apartheid activist in his day, and he's an archivist there. And so, there's many other materials to be brought back from Russia, from the States, and so on, to add to this archive to get a full picture of what is going on. So thanks very much for your time.